What's good, Chicago? This is Khalif here. We have two exclusive interviews for you today, all about the Division 2. We have the lead environmental artist, Chatterton. We have the creative director, Julian Gerighty, rocking with us as well. It was fantastic to sit down with them and talk about everything that's coming in Division 2, talk about the setting of DC, and give everybody a little bit of behind the scenes about why they picked this particular setting. It was fantastic to hang out with them, and shout out to Ubisoft again for flying us out to DC, checking out everything, and we'll have more for you in a bit. What's good, Chicago? This is Khalif here. I'm hanging out in DC at the Division event, hanging out with Julian Gerighty, the creative director on Division 2. How you doing, man? How's everything going?
Not too bad. You just stole my first line.
Oh,
I was going to introduce myself.
I mean, for the people at home.
It's done. It's done. Let's move on.
So, first of all, again, thank you for hanging out with us today. I'm really excited about everything I've had the chance to play. I've played the beta, all the kind of. I didn't get a chance to mess around with the technical stuff yet.
Yeah.
One of the things that has been a huge part of the conversation has been the way that the world has been built out. I've always been interested because I love the narrative parts. I remember you talking about it during your presentation earlier today. You were like, you love the narrative bits. I'm in that space with you. I want to talk a little bit about just, with the conversations about how the game has kind of progressed, and you've gotten some feedback from folks in all those betas and all those tests.
Yep.
Has any of that stuff come back to kind of touch any of the narrative bits, or have you gotten any kind of feedback about how the narrative is kind of being conveyed in the story that would make you kind of think about what the next step was going to be for the game before it launches?
So I'm racking my brain to see what elements were more narrative focused. I think we got some feedback about some of the voices. We got some feedback about some of the NPC barks and things like that. And I know we've addressed some of those things. The thing is that narrative is one of those things in a game that you have to settle on really, really soon.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to get in. Everything has to be localized. It's not just in English, right? We're doing this in multiple languages. So that whole process takes a huge amount of time. So it's not a quick fix. It's something that you have to invest on for the future as well. Another thing that is super interesting, and I love talking about this stuff because this is the art of making games, right? These are great questions because it's a deep dive into, okay, but how do you do this? Sort of thing. When you think about it, The Division is an open world, non-linear, co-op focused game. There is no harder type of game to write a story for, right? Because you could get up to in the first game, we had this one guy who got up to level 30 in Brooklyn. Once he gets to Manhattan, that's it. Manhattan is his oyster. He could go anywhere. He had to unlock the base of operations, recruit the three guys for the wings and everything. But after that, he could go, UN and try and take on UN. So how do you construct a story when you don't have those sort of fixed points? Now, for me, it's really important for the type of experience that we're making to have something that is open world, non-linear, and co-op focused. So I'll never compromise on those values. But we have to find ways in order to make the story really shine in other points. That's why, on the Division 2, and this is something that the team felt strongly about, we wanted settlements, we wanted civilian stories, and we wanted much stronger side missions.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're pushing it a little bit. Side missions are very expensive content for us to create because they're non-repeatable, right? You play them once, you burn them.
Right.
Whereas main missions, they're built for the invasions, different story, different difficulty levels and everything. So side missions and story-based side missions, that's just one aspect of what we're trying to push. But again, it's very difficult.
Totally.
So if, the community has any suggestions on how we can improve that, I'll take it on board. I'm not precious about these.
I mean, I love that part. I mean, I love the fact that those side missions will kind of help to fill out the greater story in some of those ways. One of the things I really loved in the presentation was kind of a more filling out of the conversation around the factions, which is super, super interesting, right? So it's like when I first got into the first beta, I was like, why in the hell are these people running at me screaming? The hyenas are fantastic. I love them. They're awesome. You talked about the outcasts. You talked about in the most recent trailer about the end game. So we talked about the Black Tusks. Will you be able to kind of get and wrap around your brains in terms of the story with them as well, of like their origins of why they became what they were and how they kind of led themselves to take over DC?
Yeah, it's our responsibility as a dev team to give more context to their actions. If not, they just become targets. Right. So there are things that you can't miss that tells you a little bit more about the factions, but there's a huge amount of audio logs, of found footage, things like that'll fill out the picture if you're looking for that. A little bit like we did on the first game. On the first game there were like almost 400 separate pieces of collectible intel about the world with different stories on the factions, on the JTF, on the division, the first wave, the second wave. So we try and fill out the story with environmental storytelling, with lore, collectible lore, stuff like that, because that sort of thing, cooperatively, we can do pretty easily. Yeah.
One of the coolest things I saw in the kind of quick playthrough of the prologue stuff, which we will not talk about right now.
Thank you.
But one of the coolest things I saw right in the beginning was just like so many teams are working on this game.
Yeah.
What's the process like for you as the creative director to kind of grab those folks together and make that stuff together and pull it into a cohesive thing for everyone to kind of enjoy?
That's a great question, man. You're coming again and again with great questions.
Thank you.
And very dev-focused questions, which I love. I think this is particularly challenging, right? Ubisoft is known for collaborations and getting a lot of studios to work together to be able to ship these hugely complex games. This particular production is the biggest one that I've been involved with. It's multiple hundreds of people on several continents.
Yeah.
I think the key to its success is having both creatives and producers that you can count on in every other studio. So today you saw Shadi. Shadi's the associate creative director in Annecy. He's the guy who's responsible for all of the missions. So, you're a bigger guy than him. So if you don't like the missions, you can go and see him.
I'm a hugger.
Yeah. But I work very closely with Terry and Keith in Red Storm. And Terry and Keith are really focused and thinking all day, all week about the PvP experience, both in the Dark Zone and in the organized PvP. But I can always reach out to all of these creatives that are in the other studios and really explore, okay, what do you think of what we're doing? What do you think of this decision? You can't be precious. I have an ego, but I manage to hide it most of the time. Don't ask the team, because they'll tell me. Yeah, they'll tell you we've got a huge ego. But it's working alongside other people who understand the direction, who agree with the direction, and are bringing their own talent, time, and focus as well to it. Yeah. So I feel incredibly blessed by being involved with the team that I'm with.
One last quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
We know how hard it is to run a live. I love you. I love you, sis. It's super hard to run a live service game.
Yeah.
We all know that. Yeah. We all seen it. We all seen it from Division 1. We've seen it Division 2. There are other folks in the space as well in the kind of looter shooter game. What's the thing that you would want folks at home to understand about the Division 2 that would give them some solace in knowing that, the services that you're kind of putting together in the game that you're looking to put out in the world is going to give them all the things they're kind of looking for. They want that long-time commitment for content. They're looking to make sure that the online services are going to be stable. They're looking for places that, folks aren't going to be able to cheat. Like what's the, if you were to give folks at home a kind of, here's what we're bringing to the stage and here's what you need to know.
Absolutely. So I think there is no better calling card than what we've just done on the Division 1. This is a game that had ups, had downs, had ups, but the team continuously delivered extra content and content that was free for everybody, as well as paid content in the DLC pass. Now that's the same team that shipped the Division 2.
Yeah.
It's not another team, you know, it's the same guys and girls working all together. Now, for the Division 2, we've already committed to that first year of free content for everybody. And our biggest priority, and a shared priority for the entire team, is health.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the experience. That's the top of that pyramid is health. If the experience isn't healthy, we're not going to deliver extra content. I mean, it makes no sense. So I'm feeling super confident about that. And you're talking about dev teams that have been doing this for the last 7 years too.
Yeah, totally. Julian, thank you so much. I know we're running out of time. We would love to have you on our show, not on location at some point. You know, anytime you want to talk about the game and come on our show, we're happy to have you.
Let me get out of the woods first because...
Oh, yeah. You have a game to ship. You have a game to launch.
Yeah.
No worries.
All right.
Everybody in Chicago, we're hanging out with Julian. We're going to get more footage and more stuff for you at home, and we'll see you in a little bit. Peace. What's good, Chicago? This is Khalif here. I'm hanging out with Chad Chatterton, who is the lead environmental artist on the Division 2. How you doing, Chad?
Yeah, I'm good, man.
Really good. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We had a wonderful tour of DC today. And since the game is set in DC, one of the things that I was kind of struck by was just how, one, beautiful the kind of way you were able to capture all the kind of intricate details of the city. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like, kind of going through that process of kind of scoping out the city and trying to figure out what places did you want to kind of focus on and pinpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a long process. We began with some research trips here. I was on one of the first research trips that we arrived here in midsummer to try and capture that feeling for the game. We spoke to all kinds of experts and people on the ground here. And we scoped out, it was a very well organized research trip. Thanks, Chloe, and other people involved. But we scoped out all kinds of locations here. I mean, the great thing about DC is that there's so many strategic and interesting locations that are lined up in relation to each other in interesting ways. Yeah. And it feeds into the narrative of the game. Plot. So one thing we do when we're building environments and recreating a real life city is we build up the city firstly in an authentic way as possible. So we build up as we think it is in a day-to-day reality, and then on top of that, we consider the chronology of events that led, to the pandemic and to the crisis and the post-collapse DC, all the evacuation and supply routes that happened that occurred on the streets. Which direction were they facing? What did that mean? We build up all the stories in relation to those events and activities, and then on top of that, you have the enemy factions, which have their own motivations. Which have taken over their own strategic locations in the city. And so you're building up everything through layers like this. And that's one way to arrive at a believable detail.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about the first game was I'm from New York, so I was able to walk around the city and find things and look and search for things that were very specific. One of the things I am not as familiar with is DC as a locale, and I think that DC is a wonderful place because we know what happens in DC.
Yeah. Yep.
But I don't think like a lot of folks know the kind of architectural history of DC and things like that, and kind of what are the kind of special places that are in DC. What was it like to try to kind of hit the high points of things that everyone knows, the memorials and the mall, but also kind of dig into some of the kind of more subtle places that folks might not know, but give them just as much love in the game?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, one thing that contrasts Division 1 is that in Division 2 we made a more concerted effort to focus missions and side missions into iconic and strategic locations. So, of course, we take players to all the monuments, memorials, and museums that you'd expect to see. The White House is the base of operations. You'll see plenty of that. But as well, we have, for example, the settlements, the Ford Theatre settlement. A lot of people, unless they're from DC, might not know the significance of that and why we felt that communities would rally around that location, which happens to be next door to the FBI headquarters that looms over the street and casts a shadow architecturally. And also we have the village settlement, which is based in one of the spread out university locations. So another aspect is that we really focus exploration in the underground, all the more so here. So special loot, Easter eggs and collectibles. You might find some special faction threats underground that you wouldn't find anywhere else.
Interesting.
So really encouraging players to explore the different kinds of spatial and visual environments that we have, that DC offers that New York didn't.
One of the wonderful things I love about the factions in the game is that each one has their own kind of aesthetic style, right? The hyenas, they're like mashed up with a whole bunch of kind of like hockey gear and you know, things they've kind of found around the world. In the places that they reside within the map, they're everywhere, but I know that there are very specific places where they're kind of started, or their origin story starts from. Do those specific places have kind of a different aesthetic that lends to kind of showcasing, you know, the overrun of those spaces by those specific factions?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you'll see signs of the factions concentrated in those locations. They have their own strongholds. They have areas where they've been, but they're not anymore. But then you have the dynamic open world where the factions might accidentally meet up, and there'll be, you know, a battle on the streets that you weren't expecting. That is unpredictable. But absolutely, there's you'll notice that the True Sons, which is the paramilitary faction, they're very well organized and well armed. And they have a huge presence around the mall in DC, whereas the outcasts that originate in Roosevelt Island in the narrative of the game, you'll see a big presence around Roosevelt, around JFK Performing Arts Center, which is in that corner, the northwest corner of DC. So yes.
Yeah. One of the things that I've always talked to devs about when it comes to dealing with historical settings is when you have to kind of add a new treatment to those things. Sometimes the places, especially if they are very well known, will kind of push back against that and say, you know, you can't destroy the White House in this particular way, or things like that. Did you come to any conversations with folks when you had to do the research?
Absolutely.
Say, like, hey, you can't do that with our monument.
Yeah, I mean, everything is legally vetted. Some things we just couldn't do. Some things we had to change the name of.
The Brown House, the Gray House,
the Off-White House, the
E-Crew, Mother of Pearl. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But so we really worked hard at building a parallel identity for DC through branding, for example. So you see the DC brand. It looks almost the same, but it's actually different. We're doing this for the police services as well.
Oh, that's okay.
So firefighting, FEMA, all those things, all the first responders, all the institutions that have a big impact on this kind of pandemic, we've had to think through from the ground up.
A couple more questions before I let you go. One of the things that is super interesting about this game as opposed to the first game was with that change of scenery, you have these new biomes in each space, especially in the dark zones and things like that as well. What was it like to be able to kind of create those new kind of ideas around those new spaces and how you wanted to each treat those, especially with the kind of dynamic weather that you also have in the game too?
So, I mean, the interesting thing is that as charming and beautiful as New York was for Division 1, these new types of spaces meant we could engage the players in new types of ways to deal with the tactical challenges. So it was a real challenge to adapt to a natural environment like Roosevelt and that you see around the Potomac. We have a different kind of residential layout that you didn't see in Division 1 in Georgetown and that northwest corner up there. And you just get different types of spaces, which mean different types of combat experiences.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Last question. The thing that I was really interested to know was when you go on these trips and you start the process of finding out where you want to set a game, and you finally then start the process of doing that work, are there any surprises that you came across, or things that you didn't necessarily know about the space that you wanted to set the game in that really kind of made you like take a step back and was like, wow, I didn't know this thing about, DC or
I think there was a lot of that in DC actually. Like, because what I was saying when we began the interview about all the strategic locations in DC, everything is very planned, for symbolic reasons as well as strategic reasons, and that really helped. That really played into what we needed to do in the game. Could you repeat that question again?
Yeah, totally. Were there any surprises that you found kind of when you got to the part where you were kind of building out the DC that was going to go in the game?
One thing was we looked at real-world flood data to get that flooding footprint to have an impact on the world in DC. We looked at what happened in 2006 with the flooding here, and so when the infrastructure breaks down, which is what the division world is all about, the physical infrastructure breaking down, society breaking down. So what happened in that flooding? We echo that in the game as a sort of to make this fantasy believable in the world for players.
Yeah. Cool. Man, Chad, thank you so much for your time. Super awesome to talk to you. Love everything. The world looks beautiful. It's so well done. And I'm super excited to jump into more of it.
Super glad to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everybody in Chicago, we'll see you in a little bit. Peace. If you like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit your bell for notifications whenever we throw up new videos. And if you like the podcast, check us out on all podcast services and on X-Ray.FM 91.1 in Portland, Oregon.